You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're talking about ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary. Track number 8 on today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes.
I'm just over here chuckling because of this title. I mean, that intro of you just now saying that is like, oh my God, that's literally the first sentence of the episode. That is absolutely, oh boy. So today's Empires is the record, Keith, that we have so far touched on the least.
Ooh, surprising.
This is only our 6th episode from today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. So we're pretty far behind on this record compared to some of the other ones. Like some of the other records, we've already done like 8 songs, you know? So maybe we'll have to do a bit of catch up on a few upcoming episodes to get today's Empires and also how to clean everything up to the episode equity of the other records. So maybe there's a little preview for the listeners there about maybe some of our plans in the coming weeks.
I think that makes sense to balance it out a bit.
Yeah, we'll get there. I don't really know why this record has been one that we've kind of like, I haven't purposefully avoided it, but like this record is lyrically very dense, and the research on the episodes that we've done from this particular record have been extremely draining for me. Like I think about today's Empires episode. I think about the Purina Hall of Fame episode. These are draining episodes to make, and so I think that today's Empires kind of has like gotten in my head a little bit for like episode prep and has made me a little wary because they're so hard to prep for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Mate Ka, of course. I mean, that was 2 weeks of work in a good positive way of learning more and exposing myself and hoping sharing that information with others. But it was no walk in the park.
Right. So much work. So I think that today's Empires has been the record that's actually kind of freaked me out about preparing for. So
that makes sense.
There's a little bit of a theory about why we're so behind on this record. But I was also thinking earlier that in a lot of our earlier episodes, we always did a really good job about digging deep on finding old record reviews and things like that. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do that a little bit for this episode. So I looked up some stuff from record reviews from today's Empires. And I found a record review from SputnikMusic.com, which gave the record a 5 out of 5. And the opening line of the review says this: 7 words, has to be heard to be believed. And I was like, yes, totally. Because if you think about how, like this song, Ordinary People, I mean, this is a pummeling track. And this is something that propaganda really hadn't done before. And this is like kind of a unique approach for this band that really hadn't been heard before. So the fact that this record says has to be heard to be believed, I was like, yeah, totally. Because there's so much new stuff on this record, including like this really grindy influenced Ordinary People track. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for fans of the band already, but also I can't think a ton of other bands that really sound like this, of super melodic, technical, like thrashy, but also really abrasive with the introduction of Todd. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And, I found another one. There's a retrospective blurb review from our friend Mikey Elfers, who was our guest on Die Jugend Marschiert. And he writes for a website called That's Good Enough For Me.com. But Mikey wrote about the record a few months ago. From the chilling intro sample of Mateka Marisakun Rasikan, teeth grinding into Geordie's double-time drums, to the shredding completion of the Purina Hall of Fame, Empires takes you on a haunting jog through history, exposing sexism, racism, homophobia, and imperialism of the past, present, and future. Sadly, a future that hasn't changed much. So I like seeing Mikey's commentary come up, because Mikey's been on the show. He's a buddy. And so that was really cool to find that as well. But I didn't find many reviews that specifically cited this track, Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary. But punktastic.com did have this song listed as a standout track by their reviewer, which was cool to see, considering this is considered a deep cut at this point. This is one that people don't really seem to talk about. And so it was nice to see this song actually pop up in a review from 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's not like the Todd song that comes to mind if I had to pick one off this record.
Absolutely. I mean, for everybody, it's fuck the border. So,
Mm.
that's like the one that really jumps out, which we haven't done yet an episode on. But just as a reminder, if people are super interested in the upcoming Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes remix remaster, which I hear about constantly, and I think it's going to come. I think the pre-orders are coming pretty soon, like within the next couple of months. Cross my fingers. But we had Jason Livermore from the Blasting Room on for a bonus episode. And this is just a reminder that we put that bonus episode out where Jason and I discuss every project that he has ever done with the band. And it is an overlooked episode if you look at our download statistics. So a lot of people have skipped our Jason Livermore bonus episode, but Jason's insights on working with the band are over on that bonus episode where he talks a lot about the upcoming work that he did on Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And that bonus episode appears after episode 50 of Dear Coach's Corner and just before episode 51, which featured George. So 50, 50.5, and 51 are pretty darn good episodes that I'm pretty proud of. So anybody can check that out if they're curious about that upcoming work with Jason Livermore in Today's Empires.
Well, speaking of that past guest, Jason Livermore, what about the guest for Ordinary People? Greg, tell us who you talked to.
So my buddy Josh Lindley from Last Believer, a podcast about good riddance, is here. Josh is a Toronto-based bartender, and he is one of the co-hosts of Last Believer, podcast about good riddance, which I've been a guest on 2 times at this point. So if anybody wants to hear me talking about good riddance, you can go over there and find their episode for the song Texas, which is off of the 2006 Good Riddance LP called My Republic. And I picked that song for very particular reasons because it's such a different style of Good Riddance song that I really wanted to be the guest on that one. So Josh, Dan, and I talked about Good Riddance over there, but I love having other podcast pals on our show, which we've done many times at this point. But I have Josh Lindley, co-host of Last Believer, podcast about Good Riddance, talking about loving the band, talking about a little bit of his podcast, and talking about ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary. So take it away. Here's my conversation with me and Josh Lindley. Josh Lindley, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so delighted, Josh, that you're here. This is like far too long coming. And, for anybody out there who may not know who you are, can you go ahead and just spend a moment and introduce yourself to the fantastic listeners over here at Propaganda Pod?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Josh Lindley. I have lived in Toronto since 1999. I have worked in bars since 2006. So 15 years I've been working in bars. Before that, I worked on a record label that some of the listeners may be familiar with called Underground Operations. I was sort of a touring guy and French speaker for the label.
Wonderful.
Selling T-shirts, driving the van. Although, to be totally honest, I never drove the van as much as I probably should have, considering I was on those tours. But yeah, selling T-shirts, counting money, that kind of thing. So worked primarily with a band called Closet Monster and also a little bit with Protest the Hero until Protest the Hero got to the extent where it was like, ooh, you guys are going to need someone who knows how to do this and not just like a slightly older friend to help run your tours, which, makes perfect sense. And then before that, I was on the radio. I went to school for radio broadcasting. So that's my professional resume. Me as a person, I played basketball till I was 13 and got my nose broken at a basketball camp. And then I started riding skateboards and listening to punk rock and hip hop exclusively. So that's like more like the cultural background.
I love it. Well, Josh, I love that you and I have come into each other's orbit because I've been on your podcast a couple of times at this point. And, doing a song by song podcast about a band is such an interesting experience. And when Last Believer Pod showed up on my Instagram, started popping up in my little notifications and stuff, I was like, oh yes, fantastic. Because I am the biggest fan of super niche, super specific content aimed at a very, very specific crowd of people. Do you know what I mean? And I am in that demographic of who might
Mhm.
be interested in a song by song podcast about Good Riddance, which you have now been hosting for quite some time with Dan. And you two are doing an absolutely bang up job.
Thank you.
And I've been so thrilled to contribute to your bonus episode for Heresy, Hypocrisy, and Revenge, and then also Texas.
Yeah.
So Propagandy and Good Riddance are, two bands that are sort of like ideologically on the same page, a lot of world issues. So I really feel like your show and our show are sort of like siblings in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And, I'm curious about your show because your show's a little different than ours. But I'm wondering if you can tell everybody out there a little bit about Last Believer, a podcast about Good Riddance, and tell them how it's set up, why you organized it that way, etc. Tell us everything that we need to know about Last Believer, a podcast about Good Riddance.
Sure. So as you mentioned, Dan, old friend of mine, Dan Forcier, is the co-host. And Dan, he grew up more around Ottawa, going to punk and hardcore shows there. And as far as and Dan and I, obviously, when you're friends with someone, you talk about things that you do and listen to.
I have editing capabilities.
I like this one.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so Dan and I had been friends for quite a while. And, we're joking now, we're 8 months into recording this podcast, that if it was 15 years ago, we would have started a band together instead.
Yeah.
But specifically, you mentioned that there's a few differences between the two podcasts. You and Keith are both Propagandy super fans.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you and Keith are both educators and researchers professionally, and I feel like personally as well. Dan and I are more on the side of experiencing songs from a strictly, like, neither of us are musicians. Neither of us are particularly, educated beyond post-secondary. Like, we've both done post-secondary, but definitely not in relation to any sort of world issues or history or any of the social issues that both Propagandy and Good Riddance talk about in their songs. However, and like you were saying, the Propagandy podcast and the Good Riddance podcast are sort of brothers or cousins of podcasts. I feel the same way about those two bands, and that Propagandy is so on the nose with what they are singing about. And when Propagandy drops names in songs or references specific events, like, you can look that up in an encyclopedia, because I'm old enough that I didn't use the internet when I was first getting into Propagandy.
Yeah.
But with Good Riddance and the way that Russ Rankin writes lyrics, it's a little more abstract and a little more about the feelings that are evoked by these events. And it's not as specific. And so when you're listening to the podcast, the Last Believer podcast, Dan and I talk a lot about how the songs make us feel and things that we can relate to in the song, rather than going from like a scientific perspective of this is what this is about because of this thing that he says.
Yeah.
So that's one difference. The other big difference is that we do 3 songs every week. Part of that is trying to keep the spirit. And again, I don't know any of the guys in Good Riddance. Like, I've crossed paths with them, but they aren't like close friends or anything. Like, I don't text them, but all of Good Riddance's songs generally are under 2.5 minutes. Tight little packages of sometimes fury and sometimes melody and sometimes both. But the idea of having, it's a 2.5 minute long song. This is what we're going to say about it. This is how it's going to go. So we generally only spend between 10 and 15 minutes on each Good Riddance song as we're going through it, mostly about what was happening at the time. We sort of bring in a lot of external influences into what would have gone into the song as well. And the other part of it is that I always think that 3 songs is the perfect amount of songs on a 7-inch.
Nice. I agree.
So I think of each episode as being like a randomized 7-inch of Good Riddance of their entire discography.
Dude, and I love it too, because when I think when I came on for that Texas episode, I think I went up talking about it for like 40 minutes, and I was like, oh, they normally talk about it for 15 minutes, and here I am just blah blah blah. So
hey, we knew what we were getting into when we invited you on.
I just can't help myself, man. It's really, it's a blessing and a curse. And what's really funny though is that there are so many Propagandy songs that have so many very, very specific storylines behind them. Like Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes has like 12 different storylines that you can follow. And like, so we feel like we have to do that on every episode. But then you take a
Yeah.
song like Funeral Procession, which we did last week, and like which I had like a complete meltdown when we were talking about it, because there are these things in there that just like blow my heart apart essentially. And so
Mhm.
whenever we hit those songs that aren't about specific things, like I'm really grateful that Propagandy does a diversity of lyrical approaches, where some songs are very specific and historical, like Oka, and some songs are very, very emotionally deep, like Funeral Procession, because then I can kind of
Certainly.
like explore these different paths and have, public breakdowns in very different ways from episode to episode. You know what I mean?
Well, I think what you're saying is something cool, and we'll probably talk about it when we get into the song in a bit.
Yeah.
But just the idea that there is, because Propagandy has built themselves up as being so just like encyclopedic knowledge about all injustices on the planet,
Right.
that when they do write a song like Funeral Procession or Without Love, it hits extra hard.
Seriously.
Because
You're
know
so
that,
spot on. Yeah.
yeah, like they can put more of themselves into it. And
Yeah.
again, this is me projecting, but I believe I've made the joke a few times, is that podcasting really, the title for Last Believer, a podcast about good riddance, was initially going to be Grandstanding from the Cheap Seats, which is obviously the title of another good riddance song. And really all podcasting is Grandstanding from the Cheap Seats. So yeah, I think when Propagandy does a song that is overtly personal, it is that much more impactful, because they have the capacity to write a thesis.
Yeah.
But when they write something that is genuinely emotional, it sort of hits a little different.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's only 80 words long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So you
Yeah.
think about like a 10,000 word academic article or an 80 word Propagandy song. I know which one I'm going for. Anyway,
for sure.
Keith and I, we talk all the time whenever we're like texting or emailing or whatever back and forth, about how much we feel like we're growing as people while doing this show. Like the amount of experiences that he and I have had, the amount of things that we have learned by doing this show, it's innumerable at this point. Like it's just vast and deep. And we are so grateful that we're able to do this together. It's such a rewarding project. And I'm curious what you and Dan have learned together. What are some of your biggest takeaways by doing this show with your friend? How are you guys growing and learning and like, bonding and all these things by doing a project like this?
Well, something that I think is cool from my perspective each week when we do shows is that going into this, I knew that Dan was a fan of Good Riddance, but not nearly as deep as I am. I'm the guy who's like looking up side projects and finding where Russ has done, gang vocals on a Comeback Kid record. And like, I'm the guy who pays attention to all that. Dan is just sort of on the peripheral, aware of Good Riddance, has seen them live a couple times. He didn't like collect all their records or anything. He's only, his memory changes sometimes, but he says that the only album he ever owned was A Comprehensive Guide to Modern Rebellion. But then he also hosted a radio show in Ottawa. So it's been really cool for me to see, as we're going through all these Good Riddance songs, how Dan reacts to them and what he associates these songs with, be it sonically or lyrically, that I wouldn't necessarily pick up on because I know it as a Good Riddance idea or a Good Riddance song first. But he's coming at it from another perspective where, he hears a lot more of the East Coast sort of Kid Dynamite, Lifetime Saves the Day stuff when he's listening to Good Riddance, whereas I'm listening to it and all I hear is Good Riddance, if that makes sense. So and it's making me go out and like find out about all these other bands that I maybe sort of know the name of, but wasn't aware that they sounded that much like Good Riddance.
Yeah, well, and Dan recently got me back into Bane. I hadn't listened to Bane in like a decade, and then all of a sudden Dan's talking about how much he loves Bane on one of your episodes, and I was like going back and listening to like Give Blood. I put that on. I was like, whoa, yeah, this exists. Holy smokes, you know what I mean? So I'm always getting little nuggets like that from you guys.
Great. I love hearing that. And conversely, I get my like weird extreme prog stuff from you guys at this point.
Yeah. I mean, Keith brings the most amazing musical recommendations to me. I can't believe how much stuff he knows about and how much he's constantly exploring the periphery of extreme music. And I love it because those are things that I just probably wouldn't ever find on my own. And then he brings in like the most beautiful things that are so harsh and extreme and utterly gorgeous at the same time. I'm like, Keith, how did you find this? Like, this is mind blowing. So having a partner doing this, I mean, it's just absolutely invaluable, because of the ways that you go on this journey together and then sort of complement each other, which is just such a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been very cool. Also, it's the sort of thing where at the start of it, Dan was like, yeah, I sort of like the band. Whereas at this point, he's definitely like fucking in.
Yeah.
Like he is in on Good Riddance now, which you would expect after 32 episodes or whatever it is we've done now.
Yeah. Well, I love that too, because I started thinking about this. I've talked about this elsewhere, but whenever I was listening to that Alkaline Trio As You Were podcast with David and Tim, who do that show, like I was really inspired by the way that they were like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we just really don't like. And then they go on there and they like rip it apart. And it's really a lot of fun when you can have people that come at it from totally different angles, and just seeing the way that like those angles come together to create a cohesive whole in something that never would have been able to come together had they been coming at it from the same perspective.
Certainly.
I love it. Well, we're going to talk about some propaganda now. And how did you get into propaganda?
I don't want to say since day one, because from listening to your podcast, I know that they were a band for 5 or 6 years before I ever heard of them. But definitely How to Clean Everything around 1994. I got a copy of that CD. And it was 100% because I had previously gotten... I swear it was like 2 weeks before Dookie came out. I got a copy of White Trash, Two Heaves and a Bean.
Interesting.
And so Green Day, I feel like such an idiot in retrospect, because obviously Dookie is a great album. Obviously Green Day are a great band, but I was just too punk when I was, 13 years old or whatever to listen to Green Day and whatnot. But from White Trash, Two Heaves and a Bean, you read the liner notes. Who are they thanking? What's Fat Records? Every time I go to the one cool record store that was in my town of 12,000 people, the kid behind the counter, and I say kid, at the time he was the oldest, coolest dude in the world, but he was probably like 23.
Yeah.
But anytime something new from Fat or Epitaph or later on Nitro, whatever would come in, Alternative Tentacles was a big one too.
Yeah.
I would at least listen to it, and then he'd wrap it back up and sell it to somebody else. And so when I heard the opening of Anti-Manifesto, I was just like, yep, I want this. And right away recognizing too, and obviously I wouldn't have had the vocabulary for it at the time, but recognizing immediately that band, that Propaganda, especially at that point, takes their subject matter real seriously, while they themselves are sort of joking around. Like the subject matter is more important than the band. And I think that's something really cool that Propaganda has done that not a lot of people have managed to pull off.
Did you hear any of the Fat Wreck comps before you heard the album itself?
No. I just went straight into the album. The first Fat comp that I heard was the Survival of the Fattest was the second one.
Awesome.
So I didn't know the first Fat comp until long after I was already in on the label.
Okay. And I really wanted to emphasize that point too, because so often it is the exact opposite answer for people that have been on the show. So I really wanted to tease out for a second there that you had a unique thing that a guy at the store showed it to you, and it wasn't the comp, because it's so often the comp. You know what I mean? So I love the fact that we found somebody who found it just because of the record, not because of the comp. Woohoo.
Yeah. And I mean, sort of organically, I was already looking at Lagwagon or, No Use for a Name and No Fat, like all the other Fat Record stuff. And it made sense at the time.
I love it. Well, so we're going to get into a song here. Ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the record, Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And so you were in there from the beginning. You got the original sound. Then you saw the slight evolution into Less Talk, More Rock. And then you come back 5 years later with this complete like 180 of a sound with a lineup change. And I am curious how you feel about Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, and what this record overall means to you as a listener and a fan of the band.
Yeah. So, okay. How to Clean Everything. I got, probably 6 months after it came out or something, mid 94, the summer between grade 8 and grade 9, I think is when I got it. And so was into it right away. And then it was like a year, maybe 2 years later after that Less Talk came out. So like a regular album cycle, every 2 years or so, you get an album from a band that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And then Propaganda toured on Less Talk, More Rock. And I didn't get to go to the show, which I was real mad about. I didn't have any money or, didn't have a ride because it was 45 minutes away from the town I was living in. And I remember like one carload of friends of mine went to that show and were like, yeah, there's this new bassist and he doesn't sing. Like
he screams.
And then it was then that someone was like, yeah, someone had figured out that he was the guy from I Spy.
Mm-hmm.
And I Spy was a band that I knew about. See, I Spy I knew about from compilations, though. I Spy I knew about from cheap $5 CDs with just like a cardboard wrapping on it. Yeah. I Spy I knew. And it was just like, whoa, the guy from I Spy is in Propaganda. But of course, at that time, I didn't know that I Spy was a Winnipeg band. And I only knew Propaganda was a Winnipeg band because Fat Mike made jokes about it every chance he got. And like, it would never have made the connection that I Spy and Propaganda were a thing.
Yeah.
And that would have been like, yeah, on the Less Talk tour. And it was always like, when is Propaganda putting out a new thing? And that waiting, that like 4.5 years between Less Talk, More Rock and Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes seemed like fucking decades.
I know,
like
right?
The last 18 months of COVID, lockdown, isolation, all of this thing makes like the wait for Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes was training for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you hear stories about how like, oh, they're going to the studio, but then like Jord broke his foot.
Yeah.
Or they're going into the studio and something is flooded and they're going into the and you heard all these stories that were coming through, probably message boards or something, in zines, people would talk about it. And then I can remember clearly the day I was at a friend of mine's house who had a computer because it was 2001. I didn't have my own computer until like 2004. At a friend's house who had a computer and it was like, there's a new Propaganda song on the Fat site. It was just like, holy shit, let's do, okay. New Propaganda song, first new Propaganda song in forever. Also in the interim, there was the, I think How to Clean Where Quantity is Job One came out before Today's Empires.
Yeah. I think that was 98-ish.
Yeah. But even listening to that, you could tell it's all just like throwaways and demos and live stuff and like goofy lyrics for whatever.
Chicken
so
fight.
It wasn't like it was new. Yeah, the chicken fight, like honestly, very funny. Really loved it. The other version of Refusing to Be a Man on that CD was great.
Yeah,
like it's good. But when there's actually new stuff, and then you click play, and the first song that they had on the site was Back to the Motor League.
I know.
Get like 2 minutes and 40 seconds in, and it's finished. And the three of us in the room just looked at each other and were like, "What the fuck was that?"
Yeah.
Like, obviously on Less Talk, there's that Rio de San Atlanta, Manitoba, which obviously it's like, oh, so they can do this. It's just not really what they're looking for. But then, Back to the Motor League, like immediately just being like, oh, they're writing songs now. This is like, it took 5 years because if there's 15 songs that are this good on this album, then of course it took that long. But yeah, really when Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes came out, that like Propaganda was a band that was already set apart because of what they were into.
Yeah.
But then to hear just even that one song is just like, oh, you have a step up in musicianship and songwriting and lyric writing and vocal performance and production. Like everything about it was leaps and bounds better than anything any of us had heard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I remember when I had Jason, the singer from Western Addiction, on the podcast for the Life at Disconnect episode, and he worked at Fat during that era. So he was like in the office when all the tapes were coming in from the band and from the studio. And he tells the story of like sitting in the conference room with everybody who worked at Fat and putting on the album for the first time. And everybody who worked there, like looking at each other, like, Oh my God. And
Yeah.
it just makes me so happy that that album had such a profound explosion on everybody who heard it for the first time, because I could not believe my ears when I was getting tracks through Napster leading up to the release of the actual record.
Mhm.
Like, I know I heard Bullshit Politicians. I know I heard Back to the Motor League. I know I heard Today's Empires. I know I heard Ladies Night in Loserville. I heard all those songs early, and I was just at my computer in my parents' basement on a Gateway 2000 with dial-up internet, like trying to download these songs off Napster and watching the screen, just like waiting for it to load. And then like the download would fail and I would start over and I would eventually get it. And I would just play it over and over and over and over. And I know that so many other people were doing exactly the same thing as me, which is really an amazing thing to think about when you think about tons and tons of like 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds sitting in their parents' basements on ancient computers like that, just waiting for these songs to load on Napster. You know, I mean, it's all just rushing back to me right now as we're talking about it.
Yeah. It's funny too. And then when the actual, like, I bought the CD at this point in 2001 when it came out, and the additional stuff that came with the CD.
Yeah.
Everyone else was, you know, if you had a CD-ROM component, it would be like, oh, here's the video for the song. No, not Propaganda. They have a 40-minute long documentary about the band, and then a 40-minute long documentary about like whatever, like a Noam Chomsky speech where it's just him standing behind a podium. It's like nothing exciting at all unless you're very, very into exactly these things.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny too.
I love it. Well, let's get into the song.
Yeah.
So I have sent out this song list. Whenever I'm looking for new guests, I always send out the song list and say, tell me what you're into, and I'll put you down, and I promise I'll get to it eventually. Even though it takes forever, many people are still waiting. So if you're listening to this and I've ever promised you're going to be on the podcast, I'm so sorry. But I've sent this list out over 70 times at this point, and nobody except for you ever mentioned Ordinary People except for you. And I'm wondering why you picked this one. I know the pickings are slim at this point in the podcast. We've done a lot of these, and Propaganda doesn't have that many songs. So I'm wondering why you picked Ordinary People.
Well, first of all, I think that might be indicative of my taste versus the general populace's taste as to music in general, where I'm always the one who likes the song that no one else seems to. Everyone's like, yeah, that's pretty good. Either that, or I just like the biggest pop songs in the world. So Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary, first of all, is an amazing title. Very long and very wordy. Also, at the time that Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes came out, the hardcore that I was listening to was definitely not the cool hardcore of the time. Like, there was nothing, like, I was good with metal. I like metal. I have a Slayer tattoo. Like, I love metal. It's fine. But the metallic hardcore that was happening around 2001, whatever, there was all like Trustkill records, and like, I was definitely cool with like Relapse, but then also there was the sort of moshy stuff. The hardcore that I was into at the time was definitely like the dirtier side of straight edge.
Okay.
And so,
like who?
Well, I mean, Drop Dead will forever be my favorite hardcore band.
Okay.
At the time, The Swarm were like in the middle of breaking up when this record came out, or they had just split up, and they're all starting their new bands. There was a band called Countdown to Oblivion. There's a band called They Live, actually, from Buffalo.
Oh yeah, I know that
now. Yeah,
they're still
Elman
playing.
used to do shows in their basement all the time.
Yeah, they're playing again.
That's amazing. And then and Tragedy was a huge deal when that first Tragedy LP came out. That blew everybody's minds as well. So definitely like the dirtier side of straight edge is straight edge and hardcore is what I was listening to a lot. And with that comes like a level of musicianship that maybe isn't there, or just the opposite. And it's just totally like a bludgeoning attack when you're listening to that. So Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary sounds like the title of a song that maybe, you know, Chris Callahan, who went on to be in Cursed, and you know, he's done 1,000 different bands.
I just bought a Cursed LP 3 days ago.
Amazing. You will not be disappointed. But it sounds like a title that he would have used for one of his songs as well. And the way that Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things is laid out as well sounds like something, like it doesn't sound like anything Propaganda had done before, but it also doesn't sound like any one specific band. That said, it is pretty thrashy and pretty grindy for the first minute and a half. And then it's weird and experimental and proggy, which also sort of leans into like maybe at that point in time, what, like, I don't know, some of the stuff on Discord sounded like, or, you know, the weird side of indie rock at that point would have like interludes like that between songs. And I think honestly, the hardcore part of the song is what grabbed me, but it's also cool to have that weird almost interlude between the songs.
Yeah, that interlude on Ordinary People, where it's the bass is front and center, and then Chris is doing that clean guitar line, and then George just like doing some tom fills in the background very quietly. Dude.
And then it all comes back in just at the end too. Right?
Like think about that riff that he comes back on down, and I'm like, holy smokes, this is great.
Sorry, is that Greg doing a country version of a Propaganda song? Is that what's happening?
But imagine the heavy riff, like a Sabbath kind of thing.
It's so good. And something that's cool about this song that also fits in with what I was just saying about Tragedy or Countdown to Oblivion or They Live, although I don't think any of those bands would necessarily say that Propaganda was an influence, or Propaganda would say that any of those bands were directly an influence. But I felt like the back and forth vocals from like 98 to 2002 was definitely more of a thing than it has been since. And it was really cool to have, I correct me if I'm wrong, you've probably listened to the song as well as many times as I have, but more. But I
won't say more though. There's, I'm not like it. I'm not like that.
But when it goes back and forth, it starts off, it's Todd leading things off, and Chris, who has been established for the first half of Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, has clearly done a lot of work on his vocals, and like his singing is just unbelievable. And he's done so much work to make his voice that much better. And then in this song, he's just literally shouting back and forth at Todd, which is awesome. When he says world of shit or bust, like it's never not going to feel awesome and funny. But I think one of the things about the lyrics specifically, like, do you know which one of them wrote this song or if they wrote it together?
I think Todd probably did. But I don't actually know for sure. Yeah.
I really like that. The way I made notes.
Nice.
Impressed. Yeah. I made notes
love
before
it.
I showed up.
Your notes are very welcomed here.
Oh, great. I love that. I think that the lyrics to the song, like there's a lot and it's dense. And as we were saying, the Propaganda songs where they are less like academic in what they are and mostly just speak to exactly what they're thinking or feeling at the time are the ones that sort of hit hardest. And I'm not going to go through line by line because I know that you and Keith are going to do that later, but I will say that the first line, words can't do justice to pain. Like I've been thinking about that since 2001. And then to bookend the song with opportunity kills common sense.
Wow.
Anywhere between, and like those two lines and everything in between is just so much to think about, but put in such a succinct and simple way that like words can't do justice to pain. Because honestly, you can never explain if something has gone wrong in your life, or you feel down, or you feel out, or you feel unsuccessful for whatever reason. Trying to explain that feeling to someone never ever works, even if they've gone through the exact same thing. And like words can't do justice to pain. I can't explain to you how much this hurt that I'm feeling is. And then everything in between, obviously. And then opportunity kills common sense deals, I think, more directly with the title of the song, where ordinary people do fucked up things because fucked up things sometimes become ordinary. And so then you're just asking yourself the question, like, okay, so what's fucked up? Is being a member of the armed forces fucked up? Is eating animals fucked up? Is celebrating a country built on genocide fucked up? Yeah, but all those things are also pretty ordinary.
Yeah.
And so who's an ordinary person, or what was ordinary before you started doing these things? The whole thing just sends you down a whole existential crisis of a spiral, which kind of leaves you begging to look up, the standoff at Lake Gustafson. like
Yeah.
like I wish I had something so simple that I could just read a historical text about it instead of having to think about the phrase words can't do justice to pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the people who listen to this show will have heard me talk about some fairly painful things, all while I completely acknowledge how good my life simultaneously is.
Sure.
So like I try to talk about things on this show that make me feel pain, and I try to go there because it's cathartic for me and maybe somebody else out there who feels similarly to how I feel. But then at the end of the day, my life is also really good. And so I'm like, well, I just feel like such a complainer because my life is so good, but I'm trying to explain these heavy feelings that I have inside of me. And so then there's another dilemma that arises out of nowhere where I don't really know how to process those things, because then I just feel guilty and angry at myself for feeling bad whenever my life is actually really good. And I'm like, oh my God, and it's so overwhelming. You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
Woo.
And this is the sort of reason why we have guys. Here's something that I want to touch on too. We're assuming that Todd wrote this song, or at least most of it, right? Something that happened again in the transition from John to Todd.
Yeah.
Which also, can we talk about how funny it is that there are a bunch of dudes from Winnipeg and their names are Chris and John and Todd and Jord. It's like, what a bunch of obviously dudes from the prairies you guys are. Says Josh to Greg, by the way, like fully
absolutely
acknowledging who's making this joke.
Dude, I'm from the suburbs of Missouri. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. So something that Todd, I think, brings to the band, or brought to the band, that John didn't have. And I did mention before about how when Propaganda writes a personal song, it hits extra hard because you know that they have the capacity to deliver a 80-word succinct lecture on Starlight Tours. Which is something that is like factual, and they're just relating facts, whereas relating feelings is something that's far more in depth and difficult to do, and probably part of the reason why John left the band to go to the Weaker Thans, because it's a better vehicle for that type of songwriting. Whereas Todd comes into the band and offers something personal, but Todd's personal is dark, coming from a place of rage rather than a place of and like also a place of understanding, but like coming from a place of rage and understanding as opposed to a place of figuring it out and maybe like it, like Todd, let's be honest, like Todd in his bass playing, in his vocal delivery, is capable of some of the most brutal attacks on your earlobes that you
extremely visceral hear.
When he needs to be. And then, like we were saying, the tail end of this song, kind of a proggy bass riff where it, you know, for all we know, was lifted from like a weird, he's playing a Voivod bass line backwards, or a Dream Theater bass line backwards, or whatever, and he's just lifted some nerdy metal thing that he knows none of the kids listening to Propaganda are going to pick up on.
You know, I'm really curious as well too, because I often wonder if Propaganda will ever do another song where they go back and forth on vocals like this again. And I wish that they would, but like, I also I'm wondering how you feel about that. Like, do you wish they would do it just because it was so well done on Today's Empires? Or do you think that we should just appreciate Today's Empires for what it is and not really hang our hats on hoping that they do something that they've already done really well?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I think it would be really cool if they did. I think that there's times and places where it would fit better than others. Obviously, I think something else that I just thought about this now, it's just popping into my brain. I feel like maybe on Supporting Cast or the Failed States tour, there was something where Todd messed up his voice.
He couldn't sing for a while.
And so I've seen Chris sing Todd songs.
Bringer of Greater Things, probably.
And like others too. Like I feel like I've seen Chris sing Fuck the Border.
Oh, interesting.
Before. Like I can't remember a specific time and date, but I do remember watching Propaganda play and thinking, oh, this is a Todd song, but Chris is singing it.
Interesting.
And I think part of it might just be physical limitations that Todd has or had. But also, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a tour where Dan Yeaman, because Paint It Black was on tour with Propaganda, Dan Yeaman sang all the Todd songs during Propaganda's sets.
I didn't see that tour, so I actually can't confirm that.
I think it would have been in like Australia or Europe or something. I definitely didn't see it happen, because if I did see it happen, I'm sure my brain would have just imploded in on itself. But
Now I want to stop the
also
whole
just
interview and go on YouTube and see if I can find
go
Dan
on
Ewan
YouTube, see
singing
if you
it.
can find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen Dan Yemin sing "Fuck the Border" or, like, yeah, it's also seeing Propaganda live on this tour, especially, was such a, again, it had been 5 years since they'd done anything, which now is standard practice for them.
Oh, you saw the Empires tour with the trio with Todd?
Yeah, yeah. And in the middle of that, of all, this is another thing, like Propaganda are just so fucking cool.
Yeah.
In the middle of that set, Toronto, especially in 2000, it would have been 2001, had a very vibrant hardcore scene where there was people paying tribute to all different, like Boston or LA or New York sort of styles of hardcore in Toronto at the time. And I can't remember where in the set it landed, but Propaganda covered the Cro-Mags the first time I ever saw Propaganda.
Nice.
They played Hard Times, and it was definitely one of those things where in the crowd you could tell, like, who are the skate punk kids and who are the, like, record nerds, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the record nerds, surprisingly, are like the guys that went off during the Cro-Mags cover.
Nice.
But also doing that Cro-Mags cover only really worked because Todd was the one singing it.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it was awesome.
There's another so is there any other thoughts on any of the lyrics or anything about the music that really jumps out at you about this one as we sort of like move our way through this conversation?
Well, I think that this was the first time that Jord ever played a blast beat on a Propaganda song.
Oh, interesting.
Only because Bullshit Politicians is like three tracks later. Yeah. But and it's just a very quick blast beat too. But yeah, honestly, this song is so exactly what I wanted. It's just such a bizarre thing that it came from Propaganda. It also does sound like I Spy as well. Like this is the thing, is like Todd's big influence on the band is heard most predominantly on this song, I think, from the record Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes.
Man,
even though, go ahead.
If you think about the last record, you have Anchorless, Gifts, Refusing to Be a Man, Less Talk, More Rock, Resisting Tyrannical Government. We have a lot of poppy material on the previous LP, and this is a total face shredder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's the first, like Today's Empires was obviously, it was a new thing, new trio, whatever. And it, as much as each album they've done, I feel like lays the groundwork for the next thing they're going to do. I think Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes was definitely the biggest leap stylistically that the band made. Even still, like I was saying, Rio de San Atlanta, you can hear that, like, they have the 30-second hardcore blasts in them.
Sure.
It just, like, how does it fit between, Anchorless?
This is a far more developed song, though, than something like Rio de San Atlanta.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Way more developed. You think about that minute-long outro on this song and the rise and fall of that last minute of music where there's no singing whatsoever. And it really stands out at me. And like that interlude part really reminds me of the opening notes of Cut Into the Earth from Potemkin City Limits.
For sure.
So I'm seeing a lot of that experimentation come in on this particular song that gets more explored down the road. But this is a really well-developed and thoroughly, like, created and hashed out song. Like, this doesn't feel accidental to me at all. The whole thing feels extremely purposeful.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, part of that too is when you have 5 years to write 15 songs, you can, write a song and then go back to it and then go back to it again and then go back to it again.
Yeah.
And each time you're adding and taking away, and each time, little twists and turns happen. And everything on Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things when fucked up things become ordinary is so, so good. Especially on an album that, honestly, this is when you first asked me, I was like, anything from Supporting Cast or Today's Empires. Let me, like, literally any song from either of those records, I can go for it. But I'm happy that we picked one that actually spiritually could fit into a Good Riddance perspective, where
Mm-hmm.
it is direct and it's honest and it's from the heart, but it's also leaves itself open to interpretation as to what an ordinary person is or what a fucked up thing is.
Yeah, we're really in your wheelhouse here for what you do
It's
over at
worked
Last
out really
Believer.
well.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I got to touch on a couple of other things here. Do you have any other
Okay.
stories or memories of seeing them live at all that really
Well,
that really just stand out to you? Besides, well, you can go into more detail on that Today's Empires tour, but any story is fine.
yeah, there's a few. So the Today's Empires tour, I saw them in Toronto, and then I drove an hour outside Toronto to go see them in Guelph.
Mm-hmm.
And that club held maybe 350 people, and it was a mess because I feel like it was the middle of July. Like it was just everyone was squished. It was awesome and hilarious and whatever. But there was something with that show too, where one of the opening bands had broken down on the way there, and so ended up borrowing gear, but instead of getting their van towed, it had to go up on a flatbed. So a flatbed truck with a van on top of it pulled out in front. It wasn't Propaganda, it was a different band. So that was a funny story. And of course, the guys in Propaganda are just like laughing at the whole thing, whatever. And then there was one show. Oh, yeah. So it was a tour they did with Strike Anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this was at a bigger venue. This was on, I want to say, supporting cast tour. Yeah. And Todd, the band comes out on stage, and as Propaganda are wont to do, they give shout outs to everybody before they don't like walk on stage and roar into a set necessarily. They'll often have a speaker. In this case, it was someone chanting out against the tar sands and people who are supporting tar sands, dirty oil. He had like a 10-minute long speech, and it's always funny at Propaganda shows because exactly 1/3 of the crowd wants to hear what the speaker has to say.
Right.
And the other 66% just want to fucking party.
Yeah.
And so this guy comes out, this activist comes out and says his whole piece, and he gets more and more excited as he's going on, and people start cheering, and it's getting louder because Jordan, Chris, and Beeve and Todd are all on stage, sort of like waiting for this guy to finish his thing before they start their set. And Todd, the guy finishes, and Todd grabs the microphone and is like, all right, here's the thing. Strike Anywhere is here to teach you some shit about what's going on in the States. And this guy's here to talk about the fucking tar sands. You know what I'm here to do? I'm here to fucking rock. And throws his microphone, and then they ripped into, fuck the border or whatever. Just like no pretense to them playing the show, but at the same time acknowledging that like, we aren't even here. Like, yeah, I get it. We're the smart band. Wink, wink. But like, we aren't here to fucking teach you anything tonight. We're here to fucking rock.
Nice.
And that was it. Also, he's one of the most engaging dudes to watch on stage, where you've got Chris, who is generally stoic. And like, if you can see his face, it's barely his mouth around a microphone.
Yeah.
And then you've got Todd, who is bouncing all over the place, like a wind up toy.
Mm-hmm. They've got a nice diversity of roles on stage. I feel like they have their niches that are all interesting, whether they're mysterious like Chris or Beeve, or they are totally stoked like Todd. And I just love the fact that they all do something a little bit different on stage. It just kind of makes it a little more visually interesting. You know what I mean?
Even on the Victory Lap tour, when I saw them with Sulin, Sulin's on the side of the stage, mostly just smiling.
Yeah.
That like the show is even happening.
Yeah.
Obviously very much concentrating on playing everything and making sure that it's nailed down, but just looking around and like taking in what's happening, like a very Walter Schreifels sort of attitude to being on stage at this point. We're just like, I'm just happy to be here.
Can't believe this is happening. This is my life.
This is the thing. Wow. Yeah, exactly.
So we have a shout out to a mutual friend that I want to do real quick. We have a mutual pal, Wabgishig Rice, fabulous past guest on Unscripted Moments podcast for Propaganda on our supporting cast episode, and author of the absolutely tremendous Moon of the Crusted Snow, one of my favorite books I read last year. And I'm wondering if you want to give it a little holler to our mutual buddy Wab.
So I love hanging out with Wab for a few reasons. One, I know that if we want to talk about important political decisions involving Indigenous people in Canada, Wab can talk about that. And like, he's an authority on it, literally. I'm just happy that I can kind of keep up. The reason Wab and I really get along, though, is because when it comes down to it, we can talk about Metallica and Slayer and Rage Against the Machine and Rob Zombie and Ministry and Propaganda and our wives are just kind of like, yeah, whatever, nerds. um so yeah, I really like hanging out Wob and his partner Sarah, and love that dude. And I was definitely like, for a second it was jealousy, and then I was just stoked that it was my favorite Propaganda song being discussed with one of my favorite dudes on your show.
What a thrill to talk to him for that particular song. I mean,
Yeah,
that was just so fabulous. And then Wob called back in to talk about Oka on that episode. Like, he left us a voicemail, and I shot him a message. And I was like, hey man, you want to tell me a story about Oka on the voicemail? And then he called in and he actually did it. And I was like, you actually did it. Oh my God, I love you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Wob. You are awesome. And if anybody out there hasn't read Wob's book, Moon of the Crusted Snow, I can't recommend it enough. I know that many of you have after hearing me talk about it on so many episodes and listening to Wob, but what a fantastic fella Wob Geisha Grice is. Well, Josh, what does Propaganda mean to you?
I'm sure that there are people that would argue, but I would say that Propaganda was the band that made me smart.
Like, I don't know who's going to argue with that.
Well, it's more an argument that I'm smart. But no, Propaganda, again, yeah, since the first time hearing them, you can tell it's something different, and it's coming from an authentic and genuine place. Even though I know in the last few years, what was the other Letters to a Young Anus, where it's basically Chris giving his younger self shit.
Yeah.
And he's gone out of his way to say, like, maybe I didn't need to be such a fucking asshole about everything when I was younger. Even though I still believe in these things, I didn't need to be such a dick about it. And I feel like Propaganda, more than any other band, with their sonics and their songwriting and whatever lineup changes, I feel like I've really gotten to grow as the band grows. And those guys are 8 or 10 years older than me. But from the time I was 14 and just mad about stuff and literally had faded stickers on my skateboard, all the way through finding out about these weird corners of hardcore and metal that I wouldn't have necessarily been familiar with, and Propaganda sort of following along that. And then getting to the point where I am just interested in a political diatribe laid over some incredibly played music that doesn't fit neatly into any one genre. Like, who else plays prog thrash? Like that kind of thing. And the idea that as a 14-year-old there was this band I was into, and as a 40-year-old I'm still into this band, but if you listen to them on either bookend, any 40-year-old would understand why you're into this, and any 14-year-old would understand why you're into this, but unless you grew up with it, you might not understand the entire timeline. And I feel fortunate that I got to experience, I am getting to experience the entire timeline.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Josh, this has been a real pleasure. Like, once again, thank you so much for your collaborations, for inviting me on Last Believer, a podcast about good riddance. I've loved being on your show and listening to you and Dan, bond and grow and make your show. And every week it's just a fabulous show. And as you know, making podcasts reduces the amount of time that you are able to listen to podcasts. I used to listen to podcasts relentlessly, and now I listen to fewer podcasts than ever because I'm making them. But like, I always try to keep up with Last Believer, podcast but good riddance, because I think you all are doing an awesome thing. And I love niche specific DIY podcasters that just make it happen and do the work. And that's what you and Dan are doing. And I appreciate what you guys are doing over there. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. And thank you for being a part of ours. It's been just wonderful to have you here.
Hey, thanks again so much, Greg. Same thing to you and Keith. Hearing the way that you guys go through all these songs, sometimes things I haven't listened to in 10 or 15 years, and remembering that, oh shit, this is my favorite song. And like, it's really nice. Again, something that is very specific as to who it caters to, and I happen to fit into exactly that bracket.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. It's been a real thrill.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
There's an
Okay, so thank you so much to my pal Josh Lindley from up in Toronto there, just up the street from me here in Buffalo, and hope that our paths can cross in the not too distant future, although that's looking a little less likely with each passing day
Right.
in our current society. The state of the situation is not good. But Josh, it was great to hang with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So Keith, what do you think we should start with tonight? You want to start with the music?
Yeah. Any thoughts about the guitar, Greg?
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk about the song in general real quick. This
Okay, cool.
performance. I don't know if you agree with me on this, but is this the heaviest song on today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes to you?
I think it's the most chaotic for sure. Like heavy obviously can take on very
Sure.
many meanings. But in terms of abrasiveness, speed, and chaos, I think hands down by far.
Okay. Do you think this is the most grindcore propaganda song that you've ever heard?
Yeah, like I probably. I don't know if like grind 100% comes to mind. But it is definitely like maybe adjacent.
Okay.
Grind adjacent, if that's a description.
Because I know that Todd did a lot of grind
Yeah.
prior to joining Propaganda. There was other bands that he was in where it was more of a grind sound for the
Swallowing
band.
shit.
Yeah, like it, and it makes sense on that front that this would come from him.
Right.
But this song is so wild
Yeah.
that I was listening to it. I was like, there's no way we're gonna find any YouTube live footage of this song. And oh, friends, you would be very wrong in that regard because I don't think they play it live anymore. Because who would want to sing this live? I mean, this is like wow, I lose my voice like like just talking on the phone. And then to think about singing this song regularly on tour, whoo. But I did find a version of the band playing this song. So before we get into the music, here is the band performing this on January 3rd, 2003 at the Congress Theater in Chicago.
I'm the clever yours! Not one with me on what the home! Well, shit or bust! No escape from disappointment! When you commit, heart, soul, dirty your place on it! Now will tear you on! And what are you capable of? Be the one to string them up, beat them to death! When you cut the bodies down, you'll see the face of your failure and shame. Then it will all prevent the lion. Bloody chorus of different troops, reading church bells and echoing virtue sung over and over and over again. Right and wrong, been living as a fool. And I can't find the meaning in this great achievement. When you commit, heart, soul, dirty your place, opportunity kills common sense.
So I have some thoughts on the structure of this song as well. So from the very beginning to 32 seconds, ending with "Cheer You On," is like that manic thrash and like knowing how good Todd is at short bursts like that. There's a few sections of this song where I'm like, I'm kind of surprised the song didn't just end there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This song is a lot longer than it feels like it should be. And so 32 seconds could have been an ending point for this song for me. Then they go into that Natural Disasters-esque style tune from between 32 seconds and 56 seconds. And then we have that super hard pick slide at 56 seconds and then back into the banger until 118. So 118 is like, to me, the natural point to where the song could totally have stopped, you know, where it really takes a sharp turn, because from 122 to 144, we have that really absolutely gorgeous interlude bridge that really shows how Todd's future songwriting with the band would develop on songs like Cut Into the Earth,
Yes.
Bringer of Greater Things, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When All Your Fears Collide, this section from 122 to 144 is like where those future songs like originate for me, is this section of these 22 seconds in the middle of Ordinary People. And, you know, then from 144 to the end is that pummeling riff with that really smashing feel to it. And then that slow down to the outro part. But part of me can't help but feel that the song should have ended at 118. And then the band should have repurposed from 118 to the end, which is basically a full minute of music, as a totally different song. Cut it off at 118 when the vocals end, use all of that pretty stuff and then that pummeling driving section that kind of reminds me of Dark Matters, and then repurpose that as a totally different song. So, like, I know people out there will be thinking, Greg, what are you talking about? That part is awesome. And I agree, those parts are awesome. But what if everything after 118 was a totally new song? What if Ordinary People was only 1:18 long? And it feels like the germ of another totally separate idea that feels sort of unfinished to me. So those are some of my general outline thoughts. Do you have any general thoughts, or do you want to jump into the guitar?
No, Greg, I think that totally makes sense, that it definitely feels like ideas colliding, and some of that collision creates frantic, positive energy and this synergy and a new sound. But there's also probably a reason why the band only had a track this explosive on this album and didn't really do anything as abrasive later on. I mean, obviously, like, Night Letters is super chaotic, but it's, I think, far more palatable and far better structured. So there are some things that maybe don't necessarily work, but you could see these different ideas and these different entities now coming together for Propaganda, kind of transforming into something new before it really figured out how to utilize those new forces in a way that would best, demonstrate the band that they would become. But
yeah, tell me about guitar. What do you got going on? What are your thoughts on this one?
I really think the intro is super deceptive.
Nice.
It really feels like the track is just going to explode into like a really catchy melodic punk rock riff with driving power chords and a punk beat. But then there's that slide that says, like, fooled you.
Psych.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Clem _ last note.
Amazing.
I don't think I would really understand. I mean, I still don't understand what's happening, but being able to visualize it, I watched this a dozen times, and that first main riff is just insane. And it's maybe the most frantic riff the band has ever written.
Maybe.
And if I've said that already on this show, I take it back, and I'm giving that award to this song.
Frantic riff, Ordinary People.
Like the left-hand position of the power chords, they're just sheer acrobatic. It's up and down the neck of the guitar in a way that just does not make sense to me. It has this cutting, grinding, almost shrill sound to the riff. And there's melody buried under that energy too. But Chris plays it so fast. I mean, it really just comes off more as chaos. And with the vocals, Todd's super harsh barks and then Chris's urgent belting, I really do think so. I guess if I said grind doesn't necessarily come to mind, listening back to this week, swallowing shit to see if I could find traces of this, it's like that coupled with something more like drop dead or like just super fast and, for a lack of better term, pissed hardcore. But that is just far more metallic, because there's a sharpness to this track that I just don't hear as much on other Propaganda songs.
Yeah. That opening riff, man, it's crazy. It's like, and like, it's all over the place. Like it's just so fast, and you have to really see it to believe it. And watching Clem play it is really awesome, because there isn't any footage of Chris with a zoomed in hand on a camera playing it anywhere. So like, I have no doubt that Chris has no issue with this song, but like, watching Clem do it zoomed in right on his hand and watching how fast he's going throughout the really, really fast parts of the song.
It's killer. It's good.
Amazing. Like, so shout out to Clem. Everybody's got to go watch that YouTube channel, because he's got so much propaganda over there, and it's all so good, and he nails it every time. So anyway, so they're and he's doing full records as well.
Right.
So in the one live version that I did find of this, which I just played for everybody, if you watch the video version of that, Chris looks like he's having a lot of fun playing this one, though. The video quality isn't amazing, but Chris looks like he's really into it. So seeing Chris have fun on stage is really awesome. So I think that the craziness of this one, which is a fairly new sound for the band at that point, because, they were just off of Today's Empires, but everything they'd done before that was Less Talk, More Rock and How to Clean Everything, which has nothing like this kind of song on it. So I think this was maybe an exciting one for Chris, because it's so wild, and maybe felt like to him, like, wow, this is like the metal and the thrash that I've always wanted to do, and now I can really do it. So that's pretty cool. But the bass, my favorite bass part is that 122 to 144 section, the one that I felt should have been repurposed as a different song. But the way the drums and bass speak to each other throughout that entire part really show the power of the future of this particular rhythm section. And really shows like what like Cut Into the Earth would be later on.
Right.
The way that Jord and Todd complement each other very well on the really slow, sort of experimental kind of stuff that Todd branched off from, away from the frantic into a little bit more of the brooding sound that he gets into later. So, I mean, at this point, Jord and Todd have been working together for like 4 years. So they're obviously got good rapport by this point. But speaking of the drums, I mean, if you compare this to Less Talk, like, this record was a game changer drum wise. I mean, Jord becomes totally different between Less Talk, More Rock and Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, just with the power of his playing. And I asked Jord about that on that episode 51 when he was on for those government issue covers and that global genocide cover. But man, love the opening rack tom build up underneath Chris's chugging guitar opening riff. And like, I couldn't be more excited to hear the work that Jason Livermore is doing to work on the drums in the new remix remaster, because it's already so powerful on drums. But like, I'm really excited to hear songs like this, to see what Jason has done, because he said it sounds like a different record. So I'm like,
Cool.
I can't believe it. I can't believe how excited I am for this record. It feels like a brand new record coming out instead of a remix remaster. I'm like, I'm going to hear these songs the way the band meant for them to be heard the first time. And it's going to be like almost like a brand new listening experience for me, Yeah.
I want to jump back real quick to an idea about guitars that I do think this has a ton of really unique transition riffs.
Yeah.
And with Todd singing "What Are You Capable Of," you mentioned that that change, that tempo change. This is by far my favorite part of the song musically. It's mid-tempo, it's catchy, there's some groove there, the chords are simplified, but how they're being played is far more complicated than just really fast, like earlier in the song. And there's a complex strumming pattern. But before you get comfortable, you mentioned that huge pick slide. It throws you back into the chaos. There's transitions come back. The guitars go clean, and it creates these really beautiful layers that contrast the harshness of the rest of the song, ending on a simpler, heavy riff that leaves the listener thinking about like this uneasy feeling, which I think reflects the lyrics a ton, which we'll talk about. Especially just like that final power chord that struck. And Greg, you mentioned the bass here, and I've talked before about the sound on this record, that the guitar tones are a bit tinny. The mids and treble sound a little two dimensional. So with so much happening on the guitar, you really need Todd here on the bass. And I tell you, if I could see an isolated track of that main like verse riff, the chaotic one, I'd probably assume it was like a death metal band and not like a quote unquote punk band. And the bass from that live video is huge. Todd sounds amazing there.
Yeah.
There are tons of things there that I pick up that I don't hear on the record, though I'm not sure if it's just playing it a little differently. There are some slides and bends that he does that add a lot of depth and more emotion, especially at that outro, that very moving, emotional outro. And yeah, poor Jord.
Poor Jord. Seriously.
Yeah, those intro toms, there's that thrashy punk beat. There are lightning quick fills and then snare and cymbal blasts. They're like real big cymbals and emphasize vocal patterns with the cymbals. Or when it says, when you commit heart and soul, those are my favorite parts of the drums on the song. He's just hustling.
Yeah.
And, they highlight during the transition riffs. Jord is super creative and busy. And there's this really great, huge fill right after Great Achievement is sung. But then there's a shorter, maybe even faster, I can't even tell, almost immediately after, that coincides with the lyrics heart and soul. Like, to me, it's so fast and unexpected. It's funny.
Yeah.
There's this big fill and then you don't expect it. And then lightning quick fill again. And then that outro, he carries that riff, which repeats. And this is where Jordan is on display on his own. He has his own additions, his own textures, his own patterns, his own syncopation. And I think it really gives him the spotlight at the end as the song kind of not necessarily fades out, but it comes to a conclusion in a way that even if it doesn't have the energy and speed of the earlier track, it's still just as creative.
I love it. Well, and the vocal performance on this is such an interesting one because we have both Chris and Todd going back and forth so much.
Right.
And, I was really cracking up earlier because I was looking for news around the release and the recording of Today's Empire, Tomorrow's Ashes, back when the internet was so much different than it is now. And I saw a bunch of posts in punk news posted about the frequent delays to the album. And one said the album has been delayed another month because first Chris lost his voice and then Todd. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, that's not surprising. I mean, these guys are going for it on this song. And, I'm sort of actually relieved for Todd that he doesn't really have any songs like this on Victory Lap. Cause I'm like, dude,
yeah.
You did these songs, you did the raging, let's keep your vocal cords intact so we can have more songs like Cognitive Suicide and Negretto. I love this old rager as much as anyone, but I want Todd to, as a person, to have a voice and be able to speak when he's 80. Do you know what I mean? I don't want him to blow himself out totally, but I just think that's just so funny.
And Chris tells the story of Todd losing his voice in the Purina episode, I think it is.
Yeah, I think so.
They go and see a band. I won't tell everything. And then Todd just makes fun of the vocalist. But in the process, he loses his voice and then they couldn't even record, which that's one of my favorite highlights of the stories that Chris has shared over at Patreon.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on the vocals?
Yeah. We mentioned before that the shared vocals, I guess I forgot how much it really takes place on this record. And This song is just a key example of that. And I think it reflects a particular time and place of the band stylistically in terms of their own goals. I think it's super unique, but I also like that that if that happens now on a later record, it's probably more support versus sharing the vocal duty. And I think I appreciate that a little bit more, even though I'm thankful that like this unique songs like this exist on today's Empires.
Yeah. Should we talk about the lyrics a little bit?
All right.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
let's get into it.
All right. Well, okay. So we have this opening. So like this song in general to me is like almost like a scorched earth indictment of all of the ways human beings have failed to create the best world possible, and how oftentimes we seem to get on board with making everything worse totally voluntarily. Like we don't have to get on board with certain things that make things worse, but we do.
Right.
And so this is asking that question, why do we get on board with making things worse? Why do we continue to do this to our entire species voluntarily when we don't have to? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Like where it's the same old thing. It's the same year after year, reoccurring, waking nightmare of looming disaster or some hope for something better. Meanwhile, that we are kind of, if we're on if we're on the train or if we're in the car going along with it, probably not enough of us are speaking up or saying something to stop whatever we're heading toward.
Yeah. So let's look at this first line. So we have words can't do justice to pain. Seems like they can't feel a thing, which is sung by Todd. So I'm going to distinguish who sings what lyric on this one because they go back and forth so often. So to me, there is no describing pain with much degree of accuracy, right? People like novelists or people who write newspaper articles or whatever, people do their best to express painful experiences in writing or in speaking. I've done a few of those on this podcast. I've done my best to experience like things like loss in my own life. And if I listen back to those things now, I'll be like, well, that's a part of it, but like, it's not the totality, right? So people can do their best to express painful experiences, but no matter how deeply you go, no matter how many words are spoken or written, the way pain feels like escapes description, right? So Todd does a really good job of stating a simple, basic thing that resonates with me as being true. Words can't do justice to pain seems so self-evident, and yet I'm not sure I would have ever articulated exactly that statement on my own. You know what I'm saying?
And acknowledging when others are enduring or experiencing pain. Yeah, Greg, that's a really important point. The older I get, the more I realize how few words I have to say when others share like their own struggles or their challenges with me. If it's some sort of loss or a medical issues that might arise due to like mental health diagnoses, I want to stop responding with a platitude.
Yep.
That is designed more to make probably me feel better.
Yep.
Or to stop responding with some personal story that takes away the necessary attention from their problems. So, saying, oh, I know how you feel, or I've been in the same situation. And though this lyric doesn't seem profound, I think on the surface level, when you really take it in and grapple with it, I think it's a necessary reminder of the pain and suffering that's all around us. Like you described the cover of Failed States. That's just so often more complex than language. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the cheapness oftentimes of like the way that people sort of downplay other people's experiences. I'd like to think that we're getting better at that. I'd like to think that we're getting more thoughtful. Maybe a lot of us, obviously not all of us, but like
Right.
I think about those things all the time when people share things with me. How do I react in the moment that doesn't just seek to make me feel better about the fact that they're telling me this painful story? How can I react in a way that doesn't deflect away from them in that moment? And how can I make the situation not about me? Because that's something that tends to happen a lot when people are feeling awkward or they want to be helpful and like then they just handle it poorly or whatever. But it's really tough to be in those situations and not to like cheaply give platitudes.
Right. And, right now, being a new parent with the stress and like some minor, but things are now okay, health hiccups with my son, just the lack of sleep and all of the things that come along with that. I've kind of been on the receiving end of people who don't seem to really be listening when I tell them things that I'm struggling with. I'm kind of asking for help. So fortunately, I also now know a couple people who have had had a child right around the same time as me, and it's almost like now I can practice that in real time, talking with the other people who are in the same boat, knowing that like right now I'm in like experiencing the same thing. So now then applying that, like this very specific example of being a struggling new parent with other things, I think is allowed me to think about that a lot differently.
Yeah, and like for me, whenever you tell me stories like that, obviously as your friend and somebody who cares about you and who does this project with you, I want to be supportive as much as I can. But like, notice I don't really try to necessarily relate to you in those moments. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All I can really do is offer you grace and support and friendship and patience and anything that I can do, I would. But like, I also, it's just one of these things that you and I are going through together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that it's helped a ton.
Oh boy. Well, we're getting crazy here, people. So then we have this next line. And since you read it the first time, I'll read it this time. Todd then sings, "Ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary." And there's a few things I think about this line, right? So first, what is an ordinary person? Does an ordinary person even exist? Am I personally ordinary? Am I not? I actually can't tell. And then second, what defines a fucked up thing, right? What is a fucked up thing? Okay, so we have these two questions here. Then clearly this answer of what is a fucked up thing will look differently to anyone you ask. A very dark conversation you could have with your friends would be asking them questions about what they would do in certain situations when other people are also in danger, but if intervening would make them also become endangered. You know what I mean? So I was thinking about this, and then I was like, where do I go with these questions, right? Do I begin researching things like psychopathy and crime or like crime intervention? Like, I don't really know where to go with this. I'm not really smart enough to understand things like psychopathy assessments and stuff like that. So I couldn't really go there. But these questions were lingering in my mind. So third, how can an ordinary person who believes that fucked up things are wrong then pivot? How can they change on that viewpoint and then come to do them anyway? What is that process like of breaking down that once ordinary person who has views against a certain thing, but then over time, certain events happen, certain experiences happen where they then change their mind on that thing. And they're like, well, I guess I'll do it anyway. What is that process like? And what must occur to take an ordinary person and cause them to be like, oh, well. So to take an easy example, under what circumstances would a person take a life, right? Can you draw your line in the sand? And then under what circumstances would you stand by and watch a robbery take place or watch someone get beaten within an inch of their life or something like that? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where's your line for what you will tolerate as an ordinary person who won't do certain things? So then, I mean, we could even take this farther, right? Let's have a little thought experiment here. Imagine a speculative fiction novel where part of the plot of the story has a television show where it is the live televised performance of people on death row getting executed. And then there's like a bunch of commercials during the commercial breaks selling products that will then go to support the families that have been left behind because of this like death row execution. And it's like presented as like must see TV. So we have people around the world like watching this thing unfold on television. And it's like all these like quote unquote ordinary people watching this like terrible thing play out, right? So I'm thinking about all these things like, whoa. And I've been like really obsessing about this for days now. It's like, what are ordinary people? What are fucked up things? And what is the process that would break somebody down in order to do those things? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, and are they aware that it is a fucked up thing? Are they aware of it, that it still is, or is it just justified now?
Or are they just so desensitized to it?
Right.
That that it's like, what do you mean this is not ordinary? This is totally ordinary. I'm ordinary, and this thing that I'm doing is also ordinary. So it's like, are they aware that they were one way and now they are another? Or are they just thinking that that thing is now also ordinary? So it's a really mind-bending question. So in that regard, I really love this particular dilemma that this song poses. Another super obvious example would be to picture a genocide from history.
Right.
Any genocide will do. Pick one. Imagine a powerful group of people taking away or killing a group of less powerful people. Imagine the people who aren't a part of that vulnerable population standing inside their homes, watching through curtains and peeking out as the powerful people take away the less powerful people who are their neighbors, and they stand by and watch it. After the less powerful people are gone to get marched away, all their homes and possessions are left unguarded. So then picture the neighbors who didn't help save any lives going to loot the homes of the people who are now gone. People they'd known their whole lives being like, oh, well, I guess I'll go get that armoire since Ricky's gone. You know what I mean? Or that rug from Stacy's house. And so there's so many disturbing things that we can think about with regards to this particular question that is the premise and the framing and the title of this song, you know?
Right. And I think genocide is what was swirling through my head the most, especially knowing Todd's connections and work with and lyrics regarding displaced people and refugees. That was definitely what was definitely seemed to be what was being tapped with that question and with the title of the song. And, you know, we've talked at length already at how prescient or relevant propaganda's lyrics are, even if they're 20 plus years old.
Yeah.
And how they unfortunately remain applicable to current events, or that they take on new meanings. And I think that's true here as well, especially the normalization of what might previously have been considered fringe beliefs, whether it be like conspiracy theories or extremist positions, coded language that act now as dog whistles for white supremacists and nationalists, through the repetition of these perceived threats to individual and national identities coming from politicians and from the media and from talking heads, the mainstreaming of messages that say you're under attack and what are you going to do about it?
Oh,
Whether that's
yes.
like the invasion of the country by, immigrants who are perceived as threats, or, the insurrection. And I'm sure most people listening can think of a friend or a family member that has succumbed to like the dark lure of the internet or rabbit holes or conspiracy thinking and beliefs that have skewed their understanding of how the world works. And honestly, the biggest thing that I thought of with this song in the title is the Milgram experiment, which is a really famous study in obedience in psychology. It was carried out by Stanley Milgram, who was a psychologist at Yale, and he conducted an experiment that focused on the conflict between obedience to authority and personal conscience. So he examined the justifications for acts of genocide, as you mentioned, offered by those who were accused at the Nuremberg war criminal trials. And oftentimes the defense was just based on obedience, that they were just following orders from their superiors. So in this experiment, there's someone pretending to be a participant who's known as the learner. They're taken into a room. They have electrodes attached to their arms. And while the actual participants, the people who don't know that person is like in on the con, the participant and the researcher go into a room next door, and it contains an electric shock generator and a row of switches marked from 15 volts, which is like a slight shock, to 375 volts. And it was labeled severe shock, to 450 volts, which just had X's on it. So the teacher, the actual unaware participant in the experiment, is told to administer an electric shock every time the learner, the person, makes a mistake, though they're intentionally making a mistake. And every time that happens, they increase the level of shock every time. So there's 30 switches marked from 15 volts to 450. And the learner intentionally gave wrong answers, so on purpose, because they were in on the experiment. And for each of those, the teacher then gave him an electric shock. And when the teacher refused to administer a shock, the experimenter gave a series of orders or prods, like, please continue. The experiment requires you to continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice but to continue.
Oh my God.
Those are the 4 things that were said.
So
65% of the participants, the teachers, the people who were unaware that this was like an experiment, they continued all the way to the highest level of 450 volts. And all of the participants in the original version went to 300 volts. God. So there are situational factors that Milgram considers, like there's the physical presence of an authority, the fact that it was Yale, that would lead people to think that they can trust it, that what's happening there. They thought that the teacher and the learner were selected randomly, and participants assumed that the experimenter was like a competent expert, and they were told that the shocks were painful but not ordinary. And Milgram said ordinary people simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part can become agents in a terrible destructive process. Moreover, when the destructive effects of their work become patently clear and they are asked to carry out actions incompatible with fundamental standards of morality, relatively few people have the resources needed to resist authority.
Dude, and that really dives in deeply to those questions that I kind of teased out of the title of the song. Like, what is an ordinary person?
Right.
What is a fucked up thing? How do you dismantle somebody to get them to do things that they would never have considered doing in the first place? And how easy is that process to dismantle them? And that Milgram experiment really does lay that out with data and evidence right there in front of our eyes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So then we have a line that Chris and Todd go back and forth on. So Todd then sings, I can't promise utopia or a better world. Chris says, I have no clever lures. And then Todd says, no harsh punishment if you don't bite the hook. And this reminds me a little bit of the resigned to the truth, I will not live to see the dawn of a better day lyric from Funeral Procession, because I can't promise utopia or a better world. And then later on, Chris, down several years down the line, Chris sings, I'm resigned to the truth. I won't live to see a better day. So like those two lines really kind of have a line that I draw between them. But the band is like, I can't make any promises And then funeral procession later on is like, oh my God, even though we can't promise it, it really isn't going to happen, is it? So this is a line that I'm slightly confused on, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts because I'm not exactly really sure what to make of this line. Is it saying go ahead? Is it like the authority figure saying go ahead, bite that hook, do that fucked up thing that is now ordinary and become one of us. Be ordinary with this thing that you wouldn't do because it's totally okay. And we're here for you, and we're going to feed you with the bait that's on this lure, but you just got to go ahead and do it the first time. Does that make sense? Is that kind of like your impression of what do you think about this line?
Yeah, maybe it's saying like I'm not offering any false hope or false promise or simple explanation. And not only am I not offering, I am not going to come down on you for not taking in whatever I'm trying to sell. Like that does in a way seem to contradict what's said earlier. But basically saying you don't have to listen to me is how I take that. Like, and I really take that first part. It's such a good line that I can't promise utopia or a better world. And it makes me reflect on, I think, where I've looked for easy answers to complex problems. If the sources I've engaged with are primarily ideological, or if they're focused on answering questions, like if they're focused on answering questions or asking them. I mean, for a few years, I kind of got wrapped up in a few podcasts that definitely offered me like a promise of a better world, pretending to be an open discourse and debate, but I think actually being just an echo chamber of a particularly narrow interpretation of religion, politics, and society. And that started changing. Like what I was listening to was changing how I thought, like not just my opinion on issues, but what was constantly swimming around in my head. So for like every unique critical idea that I was exposed to, for example, listening to like Sam Harris's podcast.
Yeah, I did that too.
I also encountered like 10 more uncritical interpretations of beliefs that wormed their way into my understanding of the world that I took at face value as being rooted in logic, therefore being superior. And I think the same can be said for any singular interpretation of the world.
And you know what's really interesting to me? Like I got really into Harris for a while as well. Just like I know that Chris has. He's talked about Sam Harris on his own podcast before. But like whenever Sam Harris did like an Israel discussion on one of his podcast episodes, who did the rebuttal? Chris Hanna and Derek Hogue on Escape Velocity Radio, which was really wild. So like they know how that feels too. You know what I mean? So that makes a lot of sense. And like I resonate with a lot of those experiences because like you can picture some of the most famous man podcasters out there, and chances are I listened to him for a while. So I understand totally what you mean. And then Chris sings, "It's a world of shit or bust." And then Todd sings, "There's no escape from disappointment. When you commit heart and soul to earning your place," sung by both Chris and Todd. Then Todd finishes, "Someone else will have to cheer you on." Love the back and forth of the vocals, especially when they both combine to sing, "When you commit heart and soul to earning your place." I love that. And the no escape from disappointment is on display every single day for all of us, because all you have to do is open the main home screen of any major journalism outlet and see all the ways that humans are trapped forever in this disappointing reality that so many of us live in. And the when you commit your heart and soul to earning your place part, what that requires is doing something bad, most likely. To earn your place, you have to become who you're not, who you previously weren't, doing something you never would have done to earn that place, you know, compromising your own morals, your own beliefs, doing something you can't take back to prove that you are capable of all the bad that you will be tasked with carrying out in the future. But in order to do those things, one would previously be uncomfortable doing. They have to do it a single first time. There's always that first time that you do something before you're desensitized to it. And once you go through with it, then you're a little bit more desensitized to it. So it becomes a little easier. So it's like a desensitization ritual, like handing a child a rifle and asking them to shoot an animal, right? That first time, like kids are going to be like, I don't really want to shoot that animal. And then you do it. And then you're like, oh, well, okay, that wasn't such a big deal. And then you do it all the time. So like you have to take the life the first time. So the subsequent times you don't have that squeamishness. So how do we get over the initial squeamishness? Someone cheerleads you. It can be a friend, it can be a parent, it can be a supervisor, it can be someone who is intimidating to you and an authority figure. It can be anyone. And oftentimes the person who cheers you on is somebody that you maybe admire, maybe somebody that you trust to lead you in the right direction. And then all of a sudden you're doing things that aren't really you, but you do them anyway. So when you commit heart and soul to earning your place, someone has to take you over that previously existing boundary into the new where you have broken your own wall down. So, and when I love this line too, because when Todd sings it, he sounds totally exhausted. Someone will have to cheer you on.
Yeah.
And he just lingers on that note. And it's like, he's like totally just blowing out his vocals in like real time on that vocal track. And it's like really wild to listen to. What do you think?
I really love that description about the cheerleading part, Greg. That's it's making me like rethink my own interpretation there. But I do think as a whole, boy, this is bleak. This is pretty bleak, and that there's only pain and misfortune.
Yeah.
And for those few who rise above it, it's probably going to be at the expense of their character, of their soul, at the expense of maybe then, if not that, then the well-being of other people. And I do hear Todd saying, I'm not here to celebrate that sort of personal decay. I'm not going to root for you to become a cog, even if it means you think you're getting ahead in life. And, you know, I think about my own job too, and it's stressful. It's for the most part pretty thankless. It's unsustainable, but I feel good knowing that I also get to go to bed at night, not making money for some corporation that doesn't care about me or the environment or the future, if doing so isn't cost effective.
Yeah. And you mentioned unsustainable in teaching. Like, I know exactly how that feels. Right now you're in like that very beginning of the year. And like 5 years ago, August was my least favorite month, because once August 1st rolls around for me, was like chaos, panic mode. So I understand that feeling. And then Chris goes into the next line. What are you capable of? And I just love it. He's
so good.
His vocals sound so good there. And I'm just like, oh, Chris, I love this. And then Todd says, you can be the one to string them up and beat them to death. And I'm like, okay. And then Chris sings, when you cut the bodies down. And then Todd sings, you'll see the face of your failure and shame. And this call and response vocal section is totally amazing and just really goes to show how unique Empires is as a product within the Propaganda catalog, because this type of section doesn't really exist in other records. I mean, this is really a special record for the ways that Todd and Chris really combine forces. And if they never do this again, I don't know that I'll necessarily be super disappointed about it, but I love the fact that it exists so much on Empires as like this time capsule of these two guys really just combining forces to create these several special tracks that do this a lot on this record. But this is an amazing question. What are you capable of? Because I think the honest answer for many of us is, I don't know. You don't know what you're capable of because you haven't had certain experiences happen to you yet. And how you react in the moment is often very spontaneous. I think a lot of people really love reading speculative fiction novels and watching apocalypse shows on TV, because we all have this inner question that eggs us on, like, what am I capable of? What would I do if I were witnessing history's greatest atrocities? What would I do if the pandemic had led to a total break in our food supply chain? Like, I was reading Wab Gishig's Rice Rice's book during the long winter, and it made me think about the fragility of civilizations in the North during long winters. And I was really creeped out. And, the line strikes so deeply because it asks the once ordinary person to consider the linear path from being ordinary to doing things once thought totally impossible. Like, you go from being ordinary to doing the absurd in relatively short order, most likely. And then suddenly you're the one doing the worst stuff. So you were totally not doing anything wrong, right? Imagine you're just the totally ordinary, normal person who's not doing anything wrong at all. And then you get turned or whatever, and then all of a sudden you are the one doing the worst stuff because the previous people who were doing the worst stuff realized that someone new, you, is now doing it and they don't want to do it. So they let the new person do it. And suddenly the new person, previously ordinary you, is now the one doing the worst things possible. And then the once ordinary person can understand the heights from which they have fallen for a variety of reasons. And that's when you're like, crap.
Yeah, but thinking about that threshold then, Greg, that you mentioned of kind of crossing over the first time and, kind of dipping your toe into something that is wrong. Even then, with going back to the Milgram experiment, at what point is it like, okay, it's a shock to where it's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I don't know if this really seems ethical or safe. And Stanley Milgram wrote about his conclusions in an article called The Perils of Obedience. He said, quote, "Stark authority was pitted against the subjects, meaning the participants, strongest moral imperatives against hurting others, and with the subjects, the participants' ears ringing with the screams of the victims. Authority won more often than not. The extreme willingness of adults to go to almost any lengths on the command of authority constitutes the chief finding of the study and the fact most urgently demanding explanation." So, and related to that, there's an article I read from the Association for Psychological Science, and it was about ABC Primetime that recreated the experiment. And for those of you who might be into horror movies, there's also a segment you can find online from the Discovery Channel hosted by horror movie director Eli Roth, which is pretty wild. And I used to show it in my classroom. But for the Association for Psychological Science, Jerry Berger, the author, describes photographs from the Milgram experiment and goes on further. The haunting black and white images of ordinary citizens delivering what appears to be dangerous, if not deadly, electric shocks in the implications of the findings for atrocities like the Holocaust and the Abu Ghraib are not easily dismissed. So you can be the one to string them up and beat them to death. Like, people might think, not me. I'm guessing most people might respond like that. But as you said, maybe that's not actually the answer, since genocide studies have often split offenders into organizers, who are mostly the political and the community leaders, and ordinary men, quote unquote, ordinary men, who kill out of blind obedience to central or local authorities and hatred of those who are deemed to be enemies. And I also thought of this, like Todd warned us with Life at Disconnect that we're all just a disaster away from being displaced from our homes, right?
True.
But how many of us are also a disaster away from committing atrocities against our neighbors? I mean, after the last few years in the United States, I really don't want to think about that question.
I don't either. It will be a dark answer.
Yeah.
That's just who I am, though. I will always default to that dark answer, probably, So then Todd sings, "This is a world of professional liars." And then I love Chris's part. "A bleeding chorus of tempered truths who, like pealing church bells, echo its virtues, sung over and over and over again." And I was just like, oh my God, that is so awesome.
It's good.
Like, I cannot help but think about how much worse the world has gotten since this song was written in 2000. You know what I mean? 2000 seems like such an innocent time. I mean, for me, right? Like I was in high school, so like my life was like a total joke, and I'm sure that it like totally was horrible then as well. But man, with the absolute onslaught of constant news and tragedy and the careening climate catastrophes that we're witnessing play out in real time in front of our faces every single day, and downfalls of governments and flirtations with fascism around the world. I mean, like things seem real bad, like way worse than 2000. Like 2000 seems almost unimaginable as we talk about this, the week after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban, another horrific earthquake to hit Haiti, a mutated COVID-19 that's absolutely roiling huge parts of the US, like all while politicians yell and rant and rave and blame and do nothing to solve, because if one side solves something, the other side knows they can't run on that as an issue in a future election. So the incentive is to not fix something when you're a minority in government. So the incentive is to not fix it and just to make fun of the other side, because then you can run on that and get your power back in the next election cycle, assuming we have one. And so it's like the most cynical display of faux democratic pageantry, while voting rights get restricted more and more each passing year, very much on purpose, and the world gets sicker and the planet degrades more and natural disasters run rampant, and those in power talk, blah, 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 and they're half-truths, outright lies, and worse, all so that they can beat the other side during the midterm cycles. And like, holy smokes, if this line isn't like this bleeding chorus, blew my mind thinking about that.
And I see the professional liars as circling back to earlier in the song. They're the ones who are offering the utopias, the clever lures, the false promises of something that can't or won't exist by, taking some bait. But those promises just keep ringing and repeating year after year.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, okay. Well, we're ending this on a real happy note. I'm happy to say here, Keith. But then it says, rotting at the bottom is better than living as a fool. I can't find the meaning in the great achievement. And I was like, I have to be honest here. I don't think I've read the lyrics to this song in years, years and years and years.
Yeah, same.
Before this week, right? This is an overlooked track for me on Empires, which I think it probably is for most listeners of this band, because it's not Back to the Motor League, it's not Purina Hall of Fame, it's not Mate Ka, you know what I mean? So I thought about this line. I was like, I don't know if I've ever really thought about this line ever. And the great achievement is success at the top of some hierarchy, but that hierarchy seems to be a hierarchy of cruelty, not a hierarchy of goodness and care and love and compassion. It seems like a hierarchy of cruelty to me. And what does it mean to lead a country if that country is based on cruelty, right? Is that the great achievement if you're in charge of the cruelty but are still at the top? What is the great achievement if we never get better,
Better lives have been lived in the margins.
Oh my God. And then the last line is, when you commit heart and soul to earning your place, opportunity kills common sense. And this really reminds me of how many people seek professional opportunities with genuine intention of doing good. And then when the right thing comes calling with the right dollar sign, the formerly virtuous throw up their hands and pursue the new opportunity. Like if you think, well, this is the opposite of everything I've ever stood for, oh, well, screw it. And then you do it anyway, you've abandoned your own common sense and you have become a shell of your former self. But now the bank account is really, really padded. And that's a real unfortunate truth about our society as well.
Right. As that heavy riff ends with this and it kind of repeats, and then Jord is filling in and demonstrating all of these amazing sounds and fills. I'm left thinking with the final words, what do people lose when they gain, when it's our society's version of gaining, right? Like, what do we lose in the process?
Yeah. So many good questions. This song offers me a lot more mysteries than answers, I think. So that's kind of an interesting characteristic about this song, is that there's so few specifics, and it really asks the listeners to make those leaps for ourselves. So I found a couple YouTube comments. And so it says, this one reminds me of old Anthrax for some reason.
Weird.
And I'm wondering if you agree. Do you know old Anthrax?
I am a huge Anthrax fan.
Do you get any Anthrax vibes on this song?
No, but
Okay.
maybe there's something that I'm missing. So if you are the Anthrax commenter, get at me, please.
Yeah, get it, Keith. So this one says Mood, May 2020. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
And I was like, another 20-year-old propaganda song coming in right hot, like still relevant. And then another comment said, 2020. So we see a lot of pandemic commentary on the comments of this particular song. And then another one said, my English teacher sent me here.
Cool.
And that one made me smile, because I turned so many students onto music suggestions in the past. And Keith, I know that you do too. So to see somebody's English teacher out there turning a student on to ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary, that is a sweet teacher. So if you're that
shout
teacher,
out to that teacher.
Shout out to that teacher. So if you're that teacher, hit us up, please. And if you are a listener of this show and one of your friends is a teacher and you think it might be your friend who turned that student onto this band, get at us. So I've got a lesson here, like a conclusion, teachable moment, if you will. This is kind of what I'm going out on. So the central premise of this song to me is asking of the question, what are you capable of? Right. That line that Chris sings really stands out to me. It's a question that we all could ask by looking within, thinking about ourselves as actors in historical and contemporary events, and really pondering by asking how we would act in certain very dark situations. It's not a pleasant thought experiment, and I don't recommend doing it all of the time, because then you will go it will harm you. It will harm you to think about these things all the time. But this song asks us to look within, honestly, and place ourselves squarely within the darkest moments of history for the purpose of changing course when possibly attractive dark moments present themselves to us, and realizing when those dark moments are asking us to compromise everything that we believe about ourselves to be true.
Right. Yeah, Greg, I agree that what are you capable of is the key. I mean, you can't miss it. It's super clear musically, lyrically, as the song shifts. I think it really gives the listener pause. What would you do if you had the opportunity to harm, maim, and to exploit? And the song really makes me think about authority and what parts of myself I'd sacrifice out of fear of speaking up or speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
How much I'm willing to endure or ignore because I'm told to please continue, like in the experiment, from a position of comfort or privilege. And I guess I just hope that if things unfold that way, I'd have the courage to be at the bottom and to rot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Keith, I'm going to rank this one. Can I go first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 2.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the song, obviously, because I love propaganda. But to me, the stark contrast of the first minute and 18 seconds and then the last minute of the song really, really feels like separate songs. And everything after the first minute and a quarter feels like it should have been repurposed to create a new song that could have turned into like a sort of a feel that mix cut into the earth and dark matters.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what that last minute does. It mixes cut into the earth and dark matters. And I wanted them to explore that more with vocals, which they don't do on this minute-long musical outro. So I dig it, but this one's not up there for me. But like, I definitely have a lot of appreciation for this one now, which I hope the conversation demonstrates. I always feel really weird about ranking songs a 2 or whatever, but like, obviously this song made me think about all kinds of wild stuff this week. But especially after seeing how this song is played on guitar and how insane the riffs are, and I was watching Clem go no 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 no, and I was like, okay, whatever, okay, this is a good one, but I'm gonna give it a 2. What do you think?
I think a lot of your thoughts overlap with mine. It's never really been a crucial Today's Empire song or a crucial Todd song for me, even if I really love specific parts of it, parts of the lyrics and the music. And though that's still pretty much true, that it's not like a crucial must like playlist mixtape for someone else kind of track. I'll say that revisiting it this week with different ears, listening again and again, made me pick up and appreciate things that I missed before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super thankful that the band took the leap to push themselves to write a record, to write a song in this record this aggressive. So I definitely like it more after listening to it so much this week, but I'm going to give it a 2.5.
Awesome. Well, Keith, this has been a delightful evening with you. I'm thoroughly depressed now. And thank you again to Josh Lindley from Last Believer, a podcast about good riddance. I've been on their podcast, and now, Josh, you've been here, and it's just awesome to do podcast collaborations like this. So this is episode 59 on Ordinary People Do Fucked Up Things, When Fucked Up Things Become Ordinary, a title I can't stop saying because I love it so much. And if you want to find us, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at PropagandPod. You can email us at propagandapod@gmail.com. And I'm real pumped for episode 60, Keith. Real pumped. So we will see you all next time.
Got it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna click that. Okay.
Me.
Ready to go?
Oh, yeah, baby.
Okay.